Hi, you're watching AWANI Tonight. I'm Farhana Sheikh. The federal court has fixed 10 days in August to hear Sri Najib Razaks' final SRC appeal. And millions of Filipinos head to the polls today to choose a new president. How will this affect ASEAN? More on that coming right up. The Kuala Lumpur City Hall is urgently looking at resolving the issue of flash floods in the city. The plan includes 14 interim measures at a cost of about 10 million ringgit under the Flash Flood Mitigation Action Plan 2022.
Kuala Lumpur Mayor Sri Musa Baki said the plan would focus on monitoring and cleaning works to ensure that outlets by the roadside for water to flow out are not clogged or obstructed. Other measures include upgrading the scupper drains, building new sumps to facilitate smoother water flow in drains, and mobilizing machinery and staff at flood-prone areas. Meanwhile, Mahadi said the Public Works Institute of Malaysia has also been appointed to study the whole drainage system in Kuala Lumpur and the causes for the frequent flash floods. A progress report will be filed every 3 months before the study is concluded next year.
Tan Sri Musa Baki Saleh said he resigned as chairman of 1MDB in 2009 as a sign of protest, following his suspicion that something wrong was going on at the company. Baki said this while testifying as the 15th prosecution witness in Sri Najib Razaks' trial over the alleged misappropriation of more than 2 billion ringgit of 1MDB funds.
Baki said he was unhappy because the management staff disobeyed instructions by him and other directors on the transfer of $700 million into an unknown company in early 2009. He quit as chairman in October the same year. Baki added before sending in his resignation letter, he had first sent a text to Najib detailing the mismanagement at 1MDB, but the former Prime Minister never bothered to respond. Baki said it did not cross his mind to report to any relevant authorities on the financial misconduct of the management of 1MDB because the matter had already been brought to Najib's attention.
At the same time, the federal court has fixed 10 days in August to hear Sri Najib Razaks' final appeal against his conviction in the 42 million ringgit SRC international corruption case. In a letter dated April 29th, the court informed the prosecution and defense that the appeal would be held from August 15 to 19 and 22nd to 26. On April 25th, Najib submitted 94 grounds in his petition of appeal on why he should be freed of the charges. Last year, the Court of Appeal affirmed the High Court's decision in July 2020 to convict Najib on 7 charges of power abuse, criminal breach of trust and money laundering over 42 million ringgit belonging to SRC International that entered his bank accounts. It also upheld Najib's 12-year jail sentence and 210 million ringgit fine. However, the former Prime Minister was released on bail pending his final appeal before the federal court. As the newest voters on the electoral bloc, 18 to 20-year-old citizens are under intense scrutiny. So what do they want? Tonight on Consider This, we speak to our guests if their survey of youth policy orientations sheds any more light. That's coming up right after AWANI Tonight. We'll continue after the break. Stay with us.
Insan yang berjaya juga insan seperti kita. Didorong keazaman demi mencapai cita-cita mereka. Super. Melengkapkan juadah anda.
Welcome back. Millions of Filipinos cast their votes today to choose their next leader. The man tipped to win the presidency is Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr., the son of the nation's former dictator. Polls suggest he may see a landslide victory, meaning the Marcos family, ousted by a people uprising 36 years ago, could reclaim power.
Voting began as early as 6 a.m. Over 65 million eligible voters are to elect not only the president and vice president, but also 18,000 other posts, all the way down to the local councils. Bongbong's main rival is Lenny Robredo, a human rights lawyer who narrowly beat him in the 2016 vice presidential race. But throughout the campaign, polls have consistently shown Bongbong ahead by a wide margin. There have been reports of issues with ballots, with some voting machines experiencing glitches. Election violence also erupted in a few areas. In Mindanao Island, 3 security guards were shot dead at a polling station after a gunman opened fire. The incident happened just hours after a grenade attack wounded 9 people in another polling station on the island. Whoever gets elected will lead the Philippines for the next 6 years.
Bongbong Marcos is headed for a landslide victory as the Philippines elections nears its end. What will a Marcos win bring to the Philippines? We speak to Azmi Hassan, Senior Fellow at Nusantara Academy for Strategic Research.
So according to the polls, I guess there is no doubt that Marcos Jr. Will be the next president if nothing unprecedented happens. So in this case, well, some say that why do the Filipinos want to elect another Marcos? But Philippine election from way back until today is all about personality. And having a Marcos name behind you, I guess it really helps because the voters basically have a little choice between Marcos Jr., which is very popular, very popular as a governor before this, and also very popular in terms of family relationship, and also they have a lawyer activist, which is a very ideal in her campaigning. So I guess it will be no surprise that Marcos Jr. will be the next president of Philippines.
Azmi views that a majority of Filipinos expect a strongman-style leadership from Marcos should he become president, following the footsteps of incumbent Rodrigo Duterte.
The problem with Marcos Jr. rival is that she wants a government that are clean, no corruption. The problem is that during 6 years Duterte tenure, he's a very popular president, even though he did his job, I think, not following the law. So I think the people want Marcos Jr. to be something like that, to be something like a very semi-dictator president that can do his job, as what Duterte has been doing for the last 6 years, especially on eradicating, this scourge of drugs problem. So I think they want a very strong president, and then they see Marcos Jr. can be a very strong president, especially when tackling the economic woes post-pandemic.
What would a revived Marcos presidency mean to the region? Azmi said that ASEAN leaders would be able to maintain good relations similar to the one they have with Duterte.
If you look at Duterte, his style of presidency is basically dictatorship, very similar to Marcos, except for a few different things. But again, people have to realize, outsiders have to realize that the Marcos era was 3-4 decades ago. And the majority of voters, the younger voters, maybe they are not that attached to the Marcos era. So I think they won't, if Marcos Jr. will be the president, I think the Filipinos, the voters, will accept them. They are happy with that. And I think it won't affect much in terms of ASEAN, in how they handle Marcos Jr. because ASEAN leaders, they can work very fairly good with Duterte. So I don't see any reason why other ASEAN leaders cannot work with Marcos Jr.
In other international news, early voting began in Australia ahead of the May 21st general elections. 2 opinion polls showed the opposition Labour Party is ahead of Prime Minister Scott Morrison's Conservative coalition.
More than 500 pre-polling centres are open across Australia for a 2-week early voting period. This system aims to cater to those unable to vote on election day and has been increasing in popularity in recent years, with more than 40% of the electorate voted early in the 2019 election. Survey results released over the weekend have indicated that the Labour Party, led by Anthony Albanese, will slightly outperform Morrison's Liberal National Coalition in the elections, centred around the high cost of living, climate change and national security. Voting is compulsory in Australia, and almost 17 million adults in a population of 26 million people are expected to vote.
Hong Kong Chief Executive-elect John Lee met incumbent leader Carrie Lam today to set out goals for smooth transition of power, including government restructuring. Lee, who was elected in a race where he was the sole candidate, will take over the top job on July 1st. In Hong Kong, the public does not get to directly elect their leader.
The 64-year-old was voted in as the next leader by an election committee made up mostly of pro-Beijing elites. Known for his hardline views, Lee is not exactly well-liked, having garnered only 35 points in a recent popularity survey. Unlike his predecessors, who either had ties with the business community or experience in the civil service, Lee's background is in law enforcement. He served as former Deputy Police Commissioner until 2021, when he was promoted to Chief Secretary. Lee's appointment is widely seen as a move by the Beijing government to tighten its grip on the city. Critics of Lee have pointed to his role in the government's crackdown of protesters during the 2019 pro-democracy movement, where he oversaw thousands of arrests and defended the police's use of force. The US has since imposed sanctions on Lee, along with other officials, for what they call the undermining of Hong Kong's autonomy during the protests.
Meanwhile, in China, tighter pandemic restrictions were enacted in two of its biggest cities, Beijing and Shanghai, in a renewed push to quash out the spread of COVID-19. China is facing growing resentment among residents and weakening trade as the lockdowns hit factory production and disrupted supply chains.
New infections in Beijing have largely remained steady, around 50 a day, while numbers have declined in Shanghai. However, the financial hub has continued to report new cases outside designated quarantine zones, which has prevented authorities from fully relaxing lockdown measures that have been in place for over 6 weeks now. The ongoing lockdown in Shanghai has had a major impact on the Chinese economy, with the country reporting a sharp decline in trade. China's exports growth has tumbled to a 2-year low. Exports grew 3.7% year-on-year in April, a sharp decline from the 15.7% growth reported a month before that.
That is all we have for you on AWANI tonight. I'm Farhana Sheikh. We'll see you again.
Gubal Akta Baru berkaitan larangan ahli Dewan Rakyat untuk bertukar parti.
Sarawak telah dipilih destinasi lawatan pelancong 2022.
Tiada lagi